Once upon a time there was a child who lived on top of a tower, in the middle of a storm. Until the age of 9, she never left her little room in the tower. Oh, don't give me that look. Like I said, this is simply a story we're telling together. Imagine that you're a part of it, and reach out to yourself.
Very well.
What is it about the tower that left the deepest impression on the child?
The window. The window was small too. You could reach out and touch the cold, wet clouds.
The storms rarely abate in Sturmel, do they?
Yeah. Dark lightning often knocked at the window. My mother would hold me, telling stories and reading me poems in a soft, gentle voice.
What about your father?
One night a week, he would come to the spire where I lived, bringing me books and teaching me to play instruments.
You looked forward to these meetings. Did you leave your room and wait for him at the top of the staircase, when it was almost time?
When I was little, but I stopped.
What happened?
The skies were very dark that day. It had been a long time my father's last visit. I was out of candles, and I wanted to find some, so I went further than I usually did. I saw so many children and adults. The music combined with their laughter was louder than the thunder.
That's when you realized that not every child had to stay in their room like you did. That they could hold their parents' hands, and dance and sing to their heart's delight. Did you look for him?
I wanted to, but my mother pulled me back. She covered my ears, and tried to cover my eyes too. It hurt a bit, but I didn't dare say anything.
She brought you back to your little room. Did you look up?
I kept my eyes closed. I heard my mother crying, but I didn't dare look at her.
Didn't dare?
I didn't dare go down the stairs. I didn't dare look for my father anymore. I never looked up again, even after my mother passed away, when my father sent me away from the spire.
Why not?
My father was a Kurfürst. He and my mother weren't married. My existence was a secret that would hurt my mother, and make things difficult for my father if anyone found out.
You were the one forbidden to recognize your father. You were the one who watched your mother waste away. You were the one sent away from home. When you went to Kazimiri's and decided to become a knight, you held a sliver of expectation. After all, the stories of your childhood, the stories about knights, had long been your source of comfort. But you soon realized you were no more than a puppet of the General Chamber of Commerce. Even your childhood in the spire was boiled down to an exotic label. The Lithuania. An advertisement destined to sell in the markets of both countries. You left the arena after getting on the wrong side of the CAC. You thought you would finally have some peace and quiet, only to be summoned back to Lithuania by a letter from your father. Once again, you find your fate written by another. Illegitimate child, competition knight. Empress's voice. You never chose any of these identities. And it all started on that spire, at the top of those stairs.
You're right. It's been so many years, but sometimes I feel like I'm still there, like I never left.
Think back to the memory that left the deepest impression. When your father took your hand and descended the seemingly endless stairs, you didn't look up.
I could. If I did, he would see the tear stains on my face, and the tears in my eyes.
Anger. I already lost my mother. Why are you pushing me away like this?
Yeah. Nothing. Why abandon me? I already lost my mother. Why did I have to lose my father too? Why couldn't you have waited in Marigold Alley, just a little longer? Why did you write for me to come back, only to leave me again once I'd returned with hope in my heart?
Arturia does not answer. She simply gazes at Viviana, at the ripples in the lake of her eyes. If silence can be considered an expression of sound, then their emotions could resonate even without a melody. Anger, frustration, pain. The same emotions reflected in Arturia's eyes. She sighs, and awakens the dreamer from her memory with gentle words.
That's enough story time. Herbst was my friend, Viviana. Our meeting was so ordinary that it's hardly worth mentioning. He was a high noble, but also a sensitive and romantic artist. We often spoke about music. A few months ago, his envoy found me while I was traveling. He knew his days were numbered. All he wanted was to see his beloved again, through my music.
You wanted to see Mother.
Not just Lucinda, but you as well. Werner did reminisce about his romance with Lucinda, but he spent even more time in that little room on the spire. Those nights with you and your mother were his only comfort in those painful early days as Herbst. That's how I knew your story.
So it wasn't.
No, I did not use swords on you. I'd already met you countless times, through Werner's mind's eye. You must hear this often, but you really are so much like your father.
I know.
But it was only when I saw you in person that I realized. You're more than just that flickering candle.
What then?
You're so much stronger. So much tougher than a candle flame. Now, I've told you everything I could. Herbst Werner died over the copy of the Golden Segist. On that matter, you know as much as I do.
You told me he knew his end was coming. Which means he knew how he would die.
Correct. Protecting the Golden Segist was his vow to the twins, and his duty as Herbst of Sturmald. Whether it was the movement or its loss, the responsibility and blame lie solely on Sturmald. Only by giving his life for it could he protect his loved ones in House Hochberg, all while ridding himself of a ticking time bomb.
It was all for the Golden Segist. I understand.
One last bit of advice, to thank you for your trust and sincerity. I also saw the shadow behind you. But now it's growing, filling the entire staircase outside.
Dank, Artoria, for the answers.
Will you be swallowed by the shadow?
The Aletheus sits with her legs crossed, her back against a desk. She places a pillow on her knees and spreads open a book upon it, the candlelight illuminating her drooping head. The girl reads in undisturbed silence. Then she raises her head from the page to meet Viviana's gaze.
You don't seem very surprised to see me, Vivian.
I saw your shadow in the doorway and knew it was you.
You've spent so long observing the shadows in this tiny room, lit only by candlelight. What are you reading?
The last night, I'm currently at the
Third to last chapter. Behind the nameless night is a huge and lonely lighthouse. The relentless waves push him, and his ST03 anti-back, but they roar as one, and towards the huge waves, as dark as night, they charge.
Hey, no spoilers, please.
You'll spend a night reading that paragraph over and over again, until you fall asleep on the floor with the pillow in your arms. Until Muddy returned in the middle of the night to blow out the candles.
Huh? How do you know?
Of course she knows through the posture, the book. This is her memory, after all. Viviana retreats into the doorway.
Are you leaving?
I'm sorry, Vivi. I have questions about my life, and I need to look for the answers. Maybe, just maybe, there's still time to open one last door.
How many have you opened already?
More than 100? I've already lost count. I just want to find a better possibility.
Oh, and what if you still can't find one? Better. Something clearly defined, like a math problem. In those doors you've entered, maybe Muddy and Vadi got to live in peace together for longer, without anyone disturbing them. Or maybe Muddy left us a few years later than she did. If you think about it, how do you know you haven't already come across a better answer? So, why do you still carry so much regret? How can you be sure you'll ever find one in the first place? And what happens even if you do? It won't change your past. What's meant to happen has already happened. Vadi always said that if he'd waited at Marigold Alley for just 10 more minutes, maybe he could have met with Muddy, and everything would have turned out differently. A petty fate does not afford us a chance to start over. But even if he did meet her, he'd still have to leave anyway, right? The story wouldn't change in any way, aside from giving Muddy one last chance to cry and say goodbye. I just don't get it. Aren't you thinking the same way that Vivi did?
Vivi,
I'm doing that to my butt.
you're disappointed, aren't you?
There's still time to open the next door.
The sound of collapse approaches. Viviana turns around. The line of doors collapsing in succession scores in her eyes, like dominoes toppling into one another, or the fireworks in her memories going off all night long. The rumbles travel from afar, reaching the tallest spire in Sturmeld. Her father seldom comes here. As the Kurfürst, he has to receive an endless line of visitors on festival nights, and her maid mother will be busy serving them until the early hours of the morning. She would huddle in the corner of a room, just like now, and shield the sounds outside with books. Once the waves washed away, once glory and life together faded. The world and all its beings fell from zenith to nadir, becoming dust. Once the forge belched its flames, once catastrophe descended, once families and old friends alike forsook the soul. The last night upon this great land, all alone, faced the swells as dark as night and began to charge. Back then, she had yearned for this so much, so full of courage. She had told herself not to be weak, to imagine herself as in Vision the night. A true knight is unafraid of disaster or hardship. The collapse is clearly visible, its ruin right before her eyes. An inconceivable sense of danger strikes Viviana in her heart. She suddenly feels a strong premonition that the collapsing doors are not simply a manifestation of her repeated failures. If this tiny room were to be swallowed up, something truly would be wiped away. Something would be lost forever.
Viviana, when the knight charged toward the endless waves, did you imagine that he was trying to overcome the entire world?
I won't leave.
Viviana turns around, protecting the little girl with her own body.
I don't even know what's really been going on, ever since I began climbing that spiral staircase. Maybe this is something everyone goes through when they come to the Genesis Horn. To be tightly bound by the knots deep in their hearts, to lose themselves in a whirlpool of chaos, becoming one with it. What do I say to you? Or rather, what do I say to myself? The light of a candle is dim, and its flame will always flicker at the whims of the night wind. There will always be filth coming at you, and regrets you can't revoke. The bafflement of finding and grief of losing will seek to swamp you over. The stories you once yearned for are not at all legends or symbols. You sing for yourself a radiance that can light up the entire land. A light that does not flicker, even when no one is walking the path it illuminates. Maybe you yourself are not that radiant light. But you too have once drawn your blade to protect it. Never forget this. Viviana draws you are a knight.
The collapse arrives, and darkness swallows her in an instant. Compared to the last night, whose nemesis was the ocean beneath and the sky above him, she knows nothing about her enemy's identity. She suddenly finds herself unable to feel the sword in her hand, nor can she light a candle. Fear, suffocating as the ocean and raging as a tide, instantly scours her to the point of numbness. But soon she feels calmed, soothed, and relaxed somehow. Dread and sorrow no longer drown her, because bit by bit, the waves are no more. Just what is it, in those collapsed doors and their cracks, that is devouring her emotions? Countless images, real and fake, intertwine, binding Viviana into a strange yet soft cocoon. What must she hold on to? What can she hold on to? A dazzling light fills up her vision. She comes to a stark realization. Tested by a dark, bitter, and thorny path, and scored in history by its legend. A knight sword staff that even time itself can never wear away. Here and now. It shines in the palm of her hand. She tightens her grip with the weapon in her hand. The knight now wields her sword staff and cleaves at the darkness ahead. Its radiance intensifies, and a resplendent gold builds all, delivering its radiance toward the ends of time and space. Gone are the spiral staircase and the doors. Viviana looks down at her empty hands, betraying the gritty sensation that felt so real just now. She shuts her eyes, reconstructing in her mind the last thing she had seen within the darkness. Malevolent spirits take the form of indescribable sounds, lights, shapes, and colors, together forming chaos itself. Piercing through it all was the sword staff, resplendent and glorious,
I was holding on to. A projection of their majesties. No, more terrifying calamities and the chaos outside the Genesis horn would befall. This place must not fall to ruin.
Frau Drost. Phew. Frau Drost, the Nearl you've been waiting 2 weeks for is finally here. Just up ahead at the crossing.
Madam Viviana Drost,
Mr. Mine.
the Nearl family has received your correspondence. I just happened to be near Liathany, so I came as soon as I could. In your letter, you mentioned seeing, and even touching, a campaign night sword spar with the Nearl family crest. Tell me everything.